3:42 a.m. Eastern European Time. Sector 0, hovering just above the freezing, mud-caked ruins of Chasiv Yar. Deep inside the earth, a Russian commander is sitting comfortably inside what Moscow proudly calls the Iron Turtle, a forward command post buried under 5 feet of reinforced concrete and pure arrogance. He feels invincible because the Borisov 2 electronic warfare units outside have built an invisible wall around his life, blocking every GPS signal in the sky. But he is dead wrong. Stay focused, because the thermal signature on your screen is about to spike from a cold, quiet blue to a blinding white catastrophe. In exactly 4 seconds, his reality is going to be deleted. If you believe that tons of logs and dirt can protect you from an angry Ukrainian algorithm, then you are about to witness a violent physics lesson. The impact is instantaneous. The reinforced steel door doesn't just fail. It vaporizes into a cloud of molten shrapnel, creating an overpressure wave that turns the air inside into a liquid hammer. The bunker collapses inward, erasing the position from the map before the sentries even have time to scream. This isn't just an explosion, it is a technological humiliation. To understand the sheer magnitude of this failure, we first need to respect the hardware on the board. This wasn't a simple skirmish line. It was a technological fortress designed to withstand a full NATO armored push. The Iron Turtle doctrine relies on 3 layers of absolute brutality. First, the electronic shield. The Borisov 2 complex was active, pumping out enough jamming signals to turn standard GPS trackers into confused paperweights, creating a digital dead zone for miles. Stay with me, because the air support is even nastier. Circling at 10,000 feet, Orlan 3-0 drones provided 24/7 thermal overwatch, scanning for body heat like eagles hunting field mice. On the ground, elite specialized infantry squads were entrenched with RPG-30 hook launchers and PKP Pecheneg machine guns, ready to shred anything biological that dared to twitch. And sitting ominously in the rear, the TOS-1A Solnsepek. If you trigger the alarm, then that thermobaric monster deletes the entire grid square with vacuum-enhanced fire. Military experts watching this know exactly what that setup implies. No human squad could walk into that meat grinder and survive. It was, on paper, an impenetrable wall of Russian steel and paranoia, a perfect defense against a 20th century army. Let's talk money, because this is where the Russian hangover gets expensive. We aren't looking at a few sandbags and a radio. This position represents a staggering investment of state funds that vanished in a millisecond. That Borisov 2 electronic warfare system alone is a massive multi-million-dollar asset when you factor in the development costs and the specialized vehicle chassis. The Orlan 3-0 drone circling overhead, that is another $120,000 burning aviation fuel every hour. Add in the cost of training those elite troops, equipping them with top-tier night vision and heavy weapons, and the fortified engineering of the bunker itself. We are conservatively looking at a package worth north of $250 million sitting in the mud. But here is the catch that the Russian planners missed. They assumed the value of their defense would intimidate the attacker. They thought Ukraine would see a $250 million shield and hesitate. Instead, the Ukrainians saw a fat, immobile target that was ripe for liquidation. Stay focused, because while the Kremlin was counting their rubles and polishing their medals, they forgot that price tags don't stop physics. This was a too-big-to-fail bank on the front line, and the market was about to crash. The Russian strategy was classic Goliath: heavy armor, smoke screens, and waves of soldiers. They were prepared for a fight of muscle and steel, expecting a column of Leopard 2 tanks or Bradley IFVs to come roaring over the hill with engines screaming. But wait, because Ukraine decided to rewrite the rulebook of engagement entirely. Instead of sending a platoon of Marines into the kill zone to die for a few meters of dirt, they initiated a psychological masterclass. Lup 1 engaged. The night sky suddenly filled with the buzzing of DJI Mavic, 3-ton drones, and the heavy, terrifying rotors of the Baba Yaga heavy bombers. If you were the Russian operator staring at the radar scope inside that bunker, then your heart rate just hit 180 beats per minute because the screen is lighting up with hostile contacts. Panic sets in instantly. The order screams over the radio: fire at will. the air defense batteries erupt, lighting up the darkness with tracers and surface-to-air missiles. Millions of dollars in ammunition are poured into the sky to intercept the threat. But here is the genius detail. Those threats weren't the main assault force. Many were cheap, 3D printed decoys or commercial drones carrying nothing but loudspeakers and flashing lights, specifically designed to trigger the Russian thermal sensors and draw fire. The Baba Yaga drones drop small munitions to force every Russian defender underground and keep their heads down. It was a classic magician's trick. Look at the right hand waving the wand while the left hand picks your pocket. The Russian electronic warfare systems were screaming at full power, thinking they were fighting a massive aerial invasion. Stay focused, because this is where the math of war starts to hurt. Every missile they fired at a $500 foam drone was a localized economic crisis for the Kremlin. They were burning through their ready racks and focusing entirely on the sky. The noise was deafening, the confusion was absolute, and the Russian commanders felt like they were winning a hard-fought air battle. But here is the twist that makes this mission a masterclass. While they were high-fiving each other for shooting down targets, they failed to look down. They were so obsessed with the air war that they completely ignored the mud at their feet. The Ukrainian operators were not trying to win the air superiority battle. They were simply buying time and noise cover. Smart military minds watching this will recognize the tactic immediately: saturation and distraction. By the time the smoke cleared, the Russian defenders were deaf and convinced they had repelled the attack. They relaxed, thinking the danger had passed. And that was the fatal error that sealed their doom. Silence finally returns to the frozen wasteland of Sector 0. The anti-aircraft guns smoke in the cold air, and the Borisovlev's 2 crews dial down their jammers, likely congratulating themselves on a heroic defense. Inside the Iron Turtle, the mood shifts from panic to a drunk kind of jubilation. You can almost hear the cheap vodka bottles clinking. They believe they have just repelled a major NATO offensive. The commander probably radioed HQ to report the destruction of 20 enemy aircraft, dreaming of a shiny new medal to pin on his chest. But folks, here is the lethal error. They are celebrating a victory over a distraction. They are high-fiving over burning plastic and cardboard while their thermal sights are turned off or pointed uselessly at the empty clouds. It is the height of arrogance. They assumed the Ukrainians were done. They assumed that because the sky was empty, the war was paused. If you were a fly on the wall in that bunker, you would see soldiers taking off their helmets, lighting cigarettes, and leaning back against the concrete walls that are about to become their tombs. They are completely oblivious to the fact that the defeat outside was a choreographed performance. Smart military observers know this look. It's called complacency, and on the modern battlefield, it kills faster than a bullet. They are busy laughing at the weak Ukrainian attempt, mocking the toy drones scattered in the mud. But wait, because while they are busy patting themselves on the back, something else is moving in the dark. Something small, silent, and carrying enough high explosives to turn their celebration into an obituary. They think the show is over, but the main character hasn't even walked on stage yet. While the Russian comms channels were clogged with premature victory speeches, the real threat was navigating the cratered moonscape of Sector 0. Ukraine didn't send a tank battalion. They didn't send a platoon of Navy SEALs. They sent a battery-powered robot the size of a lawnmower. Stay with me, because this is where the hardware gets interesting. The Ratel-S unmanned ground vehicle is essentially a glorified RC car with a very bad attitude, carrying 2 modified TM-62 anti-tank mines on its back. While the Russian defenders were scanning the horizon for the massive heat-spewing exhaust of a Leopard 2 tank or a Bradley IFV, the Ukrainian operators were quietly navigating this little electric assassin through the mud and debris, right under the nose of the Russian electronic warfare umbrella. The Russian strategy relied on the Rasputitsa, the mud season that bogs down heavy armor and stops soldiers in their tracks. They thought the terrain was their ally. But here's the twist that makes this mission a masterclass. The Ratel-S didn't need to fight the mud, it floated over it. Lightweight, high torque, and utterly silent. It didn't need to run fast, it needed to run quiet. The Russian Orlan 30 drones circling at 10,000 feet were useless. Their thermal sights were calibrated to look for the heat signature of a human body at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, or a tank engine burning at hundreds of degrees. If you understand thermodynamics, then you know why the Russians were blind. The electric motor of the Ratel S generates almost zero heat, blending perfectly into the freezing ground temperature of the Donbass winter. To the thermal cameras, it was just another cold rock in a field of cold rocks. It was a ghost. Smart military minds watching this will realize the terrifying implication. The Russians were looking for a fight of muscle, but they were being flanked by a microchip. The robot crawled over broken tree limbs, navigated around unexploded ordnance, and reached the safe rear lines where Russian troops were hiding inside their bunkers to avoid the earlier drone distraction. At 4:15 a.m., the robot rolled right up to the reinforced steel door of the command shelter. The operator back in the Ukrainian dugout checked his screen. The video feed was crystal clear. He was looking at the rivets on the Russian door. Inside, the soldiers were feeling safe behind feet of dirt and concrete, likely never hearing the faint whir of electric tires coming to a halt inches from their threshold. Stay focused, because the timer has just hit 0. The operator's finger hovers over the detonate button. The delivery is complete. The operator didn't hesitate. With a silent tap on a controller miles away, he initiated the chemical reaction. 2 modified TM-62 mines, packing enough high-explosive rage to flip a T-80 tank, detonated simultaneously. Stay focused, because this is where simple chemistry turns into a nightmare for the occupants. When that much explosive energy is released against a confined structure, the physics are terrifying. The blast wave travels at over 8,000 meters per second. It didn't just knock politely, it vaporized the reinforced steel door instantly. If you think concrete walls are safe, then you don't understand the concept of overpressure. The shockwave entered the bunker and had nowhere to go. It bounced off the walls, compounding in force, turning the air inside into a solid hammer that hit the defenders with the force of a freight train. The Iron Turtle became a sealed pressure cooker. There was no escape, no time to grab a weapon, and definitely no time to regret the invasion. The structure buckled. The massive logs snapped like toothpicks. The earthworks collapsed inward, burying the RPG-30 seconds, the PKP machine guns, and the command staff under tons of Ukrainian soil. The position was erased from the map before a single shot was fired in defense. Smart military observers know that this wasn't a fight. It was an execution by algorithm. The silence that followed was louder than the explosion. The thermal signature on the drone feed went from a white-hot flash to a dull, cooling gray as the bunker settled into its own grave. The invincible fortress was gone, vaporized by a toy. The dust settles over Chasiv Yar, and now the calculators come out. This wasn't just a tactical explosion, it was an absolute economic humiliation for the Russian military machine. Let's look at the balance sheet, because this is the only math that matters in 2026. On the Russian side of the ledger, the losses are staggering. We are talking about the complete destruction of a fortified Level 1 command post, the loss of specialized electronic warfare support, and the liquidation of a highly trained infantry squad that took years and millions of rubles to prepare. The infrastructure alone was worth a fortune, but the blow to morale? That is incalculable. They built a defensive line worth millions, designed to stop a NATO armored column, and it was dismantled by something you could technically order online. But here is the equation that should keep Kremlin generals awake at night. On the Ukrainian side, the cost was laughable. One Ratel S ground drone costs about $2,000. The TM-62 mines were essentially free, leftover Soviet vintage pulled from a dusty warehouse. Even counting the cheap decoys used to distract the air defense, the total bill for this operation was less than the cost of a used Honda Civic. Stay focused, because this is the new ROI of the battlefield. Ukraine has realized that trading a human soldier to clear a bunker is a bad investment when a robot can do it better. If the robot dies, you log on to Alibaba or Amazon and buy another one. If a soldier dies, you lose years of experience, a father, a son, and a future. This strike proves that the army with the biggest tanks doesn't necessarily win anymore. The army that can solve the math equation of risk and reward using chips and batteries to offset flesh and blood dominates the field. The Iron Turtle wasn't broken by valor, it was dismantled by a superior business model. So I have to ask you, the jury of military experts in the comments, is this the cowardly way to fight, or is this the absolute genius evolution of warfare? If you were that commander, would you rather send 10 men or 1 robot? Let me know your verdict below, because the comments section is the only place where the Russians still have a fighting chance.